Hey y'all, I'm Rylan. Welcome to my channel. I'm here today to give y'all my December wrap up. I just cannot believe that we are already at the end of the year or into the beginning of the new year, depending on when this video comes out. But I wanted to sit down and finish off 2024 strong by giving y'all my December wrap up. December for me was kind of a month of both taking a break, but also being really busy with holiday things. I was off work and school a little bit, but I was traveling a lot and was pretty busy with family and friends, so there was a lot going on in this month. But I did still manage to read 14 books, which is the most books that I've read in a month since I first came back from my reading slump, I believe. I do try to do my reviews in a rapid format so I don't talk too long about all the books that I read. I didn't do that in my November wrap up, so it's kind of a longer video, but my December wrap up I'm hoping to keep a little bit shorter. So I do have all of my books that I read this month written down in order to ideally help me do that. But before I dive into the books that I read this past month in December, I will go ahead and give y'all a couple of quick stats. I don't share a lot of stats in regards to my monthly reading because I don't keep track of stats like that. But if I start using Storygraph for real in 2025, I might be able to give more stats in my monthly wrap-ups. But for right now, we're just gonna go ahead and break down the formats of books that I read. So I read 14 books in the month of December. 5 of those were physical books, 4 of them were NetGalley, 2 were from my library, 3 were from Kindle Unlimited, and then 12 of these books that I read had audiobook accompaniments. I read a lot through audiobook nowadays. It is such a huge help for me and a very fun and engaging way for me at least to dive into my stories and to consume them. So I do love my audiobooks, so I do tend to very much focus on finding audiobooks for the books that I'm reading, whether that's a physical book or a Kindle Unlimited book. If there's an audiobook available through my library, I'm most likely going to download it. That way I can multitask and still read my unread books. So those are my quick little stats for y'all from the month of December, but we'll go back to the first page of this journal because I'm just now starting to use it because I just got it a couple weeks ago, and we will go ahead and wrap up the books that I read in the order in which I read them, I think. So let's go ahead and dive in really quickly. I will be sharing ideally a sentence or 2 synopsis and then 3 or 4 bullet points / thoughts on the book, as well as my rating of it, of course. Also, my voice sounds very scratchy. I'm getting over cold, so I apologize about that, but there's no better time to film this video than right now, so we're doing it regardless. The first book that I read in December was Collide by Bal Cabra. I gave this book 3 stars. This is about a college psychology student who is trying to get into a grad program, and in order to do that she must do a project, and her project ends up being on a hockey player whose name is Aiden, and she does not like him. She does not like hockey players in general, and so there's very much a dislike to love trope going on here. I gave this book 3 stars. I don't know if I said that already, but I thought that the female main character, whose name is Summer, is a very unlikable main character, especially for a romance. I didn't like her. I thought she was very rude to Aiden, who is a very, very sweet and a very much a golden retriever, I would say, male main character. He was the best. I loved him. He did make mistakes, he did mess up, yes, but I still thought that he was a much more likable character than Summer was, which was kind of weird because I don't tend to read a lot of unlikable female main characters in romances. And I also wanted more about the project that she was working on with him, because the first 50% of the book it keeps getting brought up, but we don't really know why she's doing this exact project or like what the full purpose of the project is for. And so I really wanted more on that, and to me that kind of felt like it was so vague that it just made me feel like I was missing something from the book, and I didn't quite love that. I would continue the series though. I gave this one 3 stars. I think book 2, which follows another couple, comes out in February or March. The next book that I read was Cross-Checked Hearts by Callie Mel, and I gave this book 2 stars. This is about our 2 main characters, Logan and Isla, and she has been his biggest secret for years now, and they are suddenly living together in college. So I gave this one 2 stars. I unfortunately did not love it. I thought that this had a very unexciting / uninteresting plot, unfortunately, and the characters were trying to act cooler than they really were, and a large part of that came from cursing, and I didn't see the point in it a lot of times. It doesn't bother me in books, but here it did for some reason, because it just felt so unnecessary and like they were just doing it to sound cooler than they really were, if that makes sense. And finally, I thought that this book had very bland chemistry, unfortunately, which is something, of course, that I really rely on when it comes to romance, is being able to feel the chemistry between the characters, and I didn't quite get that with this one. Next up, I read The Eyes Are the Best Part. This is a thriller slash horror novel about a girl who finds herself falling into this fascination of eyeballs, and her reality kind of starts to blur as she has these really weird dreams about eyes, and it starts connecting to reality and the things that she starts to do. And it all stems from, largely from her father leaving them a couple of weeks or months prior. So I gave this book 4 stars. I don't quite think I was really expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. I had heard really good things about this book, but I feel like horror books are oftentimes a hit or a miss for me, so I wasn't quite sure how I'd feel about this one. But I do think it's more of a thriller horror book. There is a lot of stuff that goes on in this book, and it very much kept me engaged. I did already mention this in the synopsis, of course, but reality does kind of get blurred a little bit as we follow these dreams and we live in her dreams, and they're very creepy. It's a very creepy book, I will say. And there is a lot of unreliability in this one as well, which I personally love in books of this genre. For the most part, unreliability and unlikability are 2 things that I'm very much okay with when it comes to books like this, so I did like the unreliable aspects happening in this book. I also read Christmas Cupid. This is a Christmas novella following an injured hockey player and a boot, like a cowboy boot designer, and they get snowed in together in this cabin that they both find themselves at and have to put up with each other for a couple days while also falling for each other. Novellas are oftentimes hits or misses for me, and this one I thought was very, very fun. I did end up giving it 4 stars. It was very, very funny and entertaining. I read it super quickly, and a large part of that is because it was so funny to me. I thought that there was such a perfect amount of spice versus heart in this book, and I did appreciate the fact that you still got to feel their chemistry growing in such a short amount of time, which I feel like can probably be very hard to do, so I really like that aspect. And also, 3rd bullet point for this one is that this book has the cutest dog animal sidekick, and it's on the cover, of course, but he was so much fun and just added a lot to the story, I thought. My first NetGalley read from December was Cleat Cute by Meryl Wilsner. This is about a pro soccer player and a rookie on her team who end up becoming friends and then falling for each other during the new soccer season. This is a sapphic rivals to friends to lovers book, I would say, and I thought that at times it felt like there's more spice than plot, which I feel like for me, nowadays at least, I very much rely on plot over spice, and so there are a lot of times when I felt like it was just chapter after chapter after chapter of spice, and it kind of pulled me out of the story a little bit personally, but it was still fun. It was still cute and heartwarming as well, even though the spice aspects of it I think kind of pulled me away from the characters some, because I just felt like that was such a focus between the 2 of them, and at times because of that I wasn't quite sure of their chemistry on another level besides just the spice, if that makes sense. But I have read from Meryl Wilsner in the past and I've really enjoyed their works, so I'm excited to see what comes next after this one. I gave Cleat Cute 3 stars. I don't know if I said that, but I did like it, but didn't love it. Keeping up with the trend of holiday books in the months of November and December, I ended up reading, kind of on a whim, Cruel Winter with You by Ali Hazelwood. This is a novella about 2 characters who grew up together, and they've grown up and have gone their separate ways, and she gets trapped in a blizzard in his house because her father sent her to go get a pan from his family, and it's snowing really bad outside and he's not gonna let her go home until the storm is over. So they're trapped together in this house by themselves on Christmas. I thought this book was so fun. Again, novellas are very tricky for me to feel fully connected to, but Ali Hazelwood is just such a good writer in my opinion, and makes writing novellas, makes reading novellas, I guess, so much fun. This was your classic funny and cute Ali Hazelwood book. Lots of banter and funny moments, and of course you get at least one spicy scene in this one, but I also thought that she was able to provide some depth to her characters in the span of 83 pages, which is probably hard to do, like I said about the other novella that I read this month. So I have to appreciate that aspect as well. And this book had the he falls first, or the he's been in love with her for years trope, which I'm obsessed with. And I just thought it was so well done, and I wanted more at the end of this book. I gave this book 4 stars. Again, I've already forgotten if I said that or not. But after Cruel Winter with You, I automatically went into reading Merry Ever After by Tessa Bailey, which is another Christmas novella, and they're both part of this holiday novella collection that Amazon Prime published in November, I think. And this one was very different from the Ali Hazelwood one. I gave it 2 stars. Didn't love it as much, but it's about a single mother who lives in a small town and designs clothes, and she ends up making a pair of pants for the biggest guy in town, and he's a farmer, and there's just a lot of spice and there's not much plot in my opinion, and some of the language just felt very uncomfortable to me for some reason in terms of the spice and what they were calling each other and what was happening. It just felt very unlike Tessa Bailey's other books to me for some reason, and I didn't end up loving it, so I gave this one 2 stars. After that, I read another NetGalley arc, and that one was My Sweet Girl. This is about our main character who is very, very unreliable, but keeps believing that all these things are happening to her. She thinks that her roommate's been murdered, her parents are on this trip, and a lot of the reality is being blurred because she is kind of living in a state of drinking alcohol and a lack of sleep and things like that, and so she's very much an unreliable character, and I gave this one 2 stars. Unreliable / unlikable characters to me in thrillers are great most of the time, but there does come a point when it goes way too far or it's too extreme, and I thought that that was the case here with our main character in this book. I also personally enjoyed the past timeline more than the present. So when we were in the past, I was more engaged in the book, but when you're back in the present, I kind of found that I stopped caring or was getting very much annoyed with what was happening in the present plot. And I think a part of this comes again from language, which doesn't tend to bother me in books. Like, it's just not something that I think about, but it was like in every other sentence in this book, curse words were being used, and I didn't feel like it furthered the plot of the story at all. If anything, it just annoyed me and made me not want to read this one, but I can't DNF books, so I don't, because I just can't mentally make myself do that. So I kept reading it even though I was annoyed. Plus, this was a NetGalley arc, so I wanted to finish reading it, but I just didn't like it in the end, which I'm very bummed about, but I was able to cross this NetGalley book off my list, which I always very much like doing. I think this next book was probably one of my favorite books of the month, if not my favorite book, and that one was Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. This is about our main character Eve, who finds out that she's pregnant after a one-night stand, and they're very amicable about it, but while she's pregnant and growing this child inside of her, she's also falling for her best friend's brother. This book was chef's kiss. It was so much fun. I do not like, personally, the surprise or unexpected pregnancy trope in books, but it worked here, and I'm so glad that I read it because it was just absolutely the cutest book, and I thought that Shep, who was our main male character, was the best, one of the best characters I've read in a long time. He was just such a sweetheart toward Eve and her baby, and I just loved seeing them together. Books like this make me love the friends to lovers trope more. It used to not be a trope that I loved, but now I definitely do like it after reading several friends to lovers books recently, and definitely this one has become a favorite book of this year for me, which is a surprise, but my friend Aylin told me to read it, so I did, and I found a new favorite, so there's that. But 5 stars to this one. I absolutely loved it. I also read Dreams of 18 around the same time that I read Ready or Not by Saffron A. Kent, and I gave this one 3 stars. This is about our main character Violet, who has been in love with an older man for years now, and after something happens that kind of ruins both of their lives, she's determined to go apologize to him and make it up to him. So she travels the country to find him, and they end up getting together, I guess is how I'll put that. But I read this book finally after having it for a year because this is my Christmas or birthday gift from Stasia in 2023 and I really needed to read it. So I finally did. She actually annotated the book for me, so it was fun to read her annotations while I read it. I liked it. I gave it 3 stars, of course. It was more taboo than I normally read nowadays, which I'm not against, but I just wasn't quite used to it after not reading it for so long. And I also thought that it was very slow and a little bit cringy at times. Some of the things that they said to each other, I was kind of like, ugh, I don't love that. But at the same time, it was also very much an addictive read, and I do feel like I read it very quickly in the chaos of beginning to travel for Christmas. So I did like it, didn't love it, not my favorite book by the author, but I will of course keep reading her in the future. Another disappointing read for me unfortunately came in the form of The Christmas Tree Farm by Lori Gilmore. I did just read this book for my last Bookmas vlog, which I can tag above if you're interested in watching it, but I gave this book 2 stars. I did not like it unfortunately, which sucks because everybody else seems to love this series. This is a book about our main characters, Kira and Bennett. Kira hates Christmas and Bennett is new or visiting in this small town, and he's very much a fixer-upper, and they keep running into each other and spending time together, I guess, unintentionally, and it makes them kind of fall for each other in those moments. I thought this book was too horny. These characters were so horny for each other without actually knowing each other, and I felt like that was all that their relationship was based on at times, and that's fine to an extent, but if I can't feel their chemistry on a deeper level, I'm not gonna fall in love with the characters. I also thought that Kira was a very rude female main character for an unnecessary reason. Sure, you can say that you hate Christmas, but she's very rude to Bennett, who was probably too nice of a guy, but it was just kind of frustrating to read her POV because she was just not a nice person for a lot of the book. And that made me not like them as characters. I thought that they were both very one-dimensional in the end, unfortunately. I can see the appeal to this series, like the small town idea is very, very cute, but I didn't really get Christmas vibes from this book, and unfortunately, I didn't love either of our main characters, so 2 stars to this one. I did tab this book as well, so I'm going to try to list it on Pango or Mercari and see if somebody else might want it and love it more than I did, but unfortunately, I didn't like this one like I thought I would, so 2 stars. It sucks. We are almost to the end of my wrap up. I have been keeping pretty well to my bullet points, I think, which hopefully has been helping the length of this video. Next up, I read Primal Animals by Julia Lynn Rubin. I read this book from NetGalley and I unfortunately gave it 2 stars. This is about our main character, whose name I've already forgotten, who goes to a summer camp, kind of like an elite summer camp. It's full of test prep and very fun like classes that you can take, like horseback riding or swimming or archery, while also doing all this test prep stuff for college preparation, things like that. But there's very much a sinister cult activity going on here, and when a boy from the camp gets murdered, our main character starts panicking. There was just something about this book that I didn't end up loving. Normally I love cult books or books that have cults included in them as a part of the plot, but I didn't really like it here. I was kind of confused about all the connections that were being made. I didn't love some of the scenes that happened, especially in regards to animal cruelty. That's not something that I thought bothered me, but here it very much did, and I was very much kind of done with the book after a very specific scene that happened. And also I was just not loving the plot or the characters or the plot twist. Especially I did not love the plot twist. It didn't make sense to me personally, and I don't know, I thought it kind of threw everything off for me. So I gave this book 2 stars. I have read another book by this author though that I absolutely loved, so I would check out more from them in the future, but this one specifically was not for me. But again, NetGalley book that I finally read, so we love to see that. My last physical book for the month that I just finished a couple days ago was The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year by Allie Carter, and I gave this book 4 stars. I don't know what I expected from this one, but it was so cute. If you're looking for a cozy, locked room mystery in an isolated mansion in the middle of a snowstorm, while also watching 2 characters who supposedly hate each other fall in love, you gotta read this book. You got to read it. I will say it is technically a Christmas book, but it didn't feel overwhelmingly like Christmas to me in this book. So I do think that you could still read it in the winter just in general. It does take place around Christmas, but the main focus of this book is the mystery and the romance. And I feel like I probably could have read it in November, December, January, or February probably if I wanted to fit in with the season of the book. But I don't think that you have to read this one just around Christmas time, which is already past, of course. So if you're still wanting to pick this book up, would recommend doing so. I did want more from the ending. I thought that the way that it ended was kind of a cop-out, especially when it comes to this huge mystery writer that our two main characters are with for Christmas. Let me give you all a synopsis and then that sentence will make sense. But this is a book about our two main characters, Maggie and Ethan. They are both writers, feuding writers, at least on her end, and they both get invited to a famous mystery author's house in England or Scotland or somewhere in Europe. They are both American authors, and Maggie does not like Ethan. She thinks that they're kind of enemies, but turns out Ethan has been in love with her for years. So the he falls first trope is very much a part of this, and I was obsessed with it. I love Ethan as a character. Maggie was also very fun, and it was very fun watching them fall in love while being involved in this mystery after the author goes missing a couple of days before Christmas, but also is leaving clues for the people in the house. So I thought that this book was so much fun. I don't know if I was expecting to love it as much as I did, but I am glad that I read it because it was one of the cutest books that I had read in a long time. The final book that I read in December was Secrets Never Die by Vincent Ralph, I believe. This is a young adult mystery about these five teenagers, I guess, who have this little ritual that they do every year on Halloween where they go into the woods and they just share their darkest secrets in this little hut that's in the woods. Nobody knows what their secrets are. They go in by themselves and they just kind of speak it into existence. That way it can kind of get off their chest. Somehow though, somebody had been listening to their secrets and is now stalking and blackmailing and involved in these teenagers' lives, just trying to get them to do bad things, and is hurting their families and stalking their families and making them feel very uncomfortable. So our teenagers are trying to figure out what is happening to them and who would be stalking them and how to get to the bottom of things. But it turns out the people that they love the most are also involved in what is happening to them. This book was another NetGalley read and I ended up really enjoying it. I gave it 4 stars. I actually just finished it last night when I'm filming this video, but I really enjoyed it. It was very engaging and very captivating, and things just kept happening that kept me needing to know what was going to happen. This is a very bingeable book. I did want more from the ending and I was a little bit confused, but I don't know if I had just checked out at that point or if there was something kind of missing, but I did have a very fun time with it, and I'd be very curious to see what else the author has written because I did like this one a lot, and I don't tend to read a ton of YA thrillers anymore, but this one was very enjoyable and I'm glad that I picked it up, and I'm glad that I had it on NetGalley. I don't know how I had it on NetGalley. It's probably a widget or something, but it was a very great time and it was a fun book to kind of close out the year with, in my opinion. I may or may not end up reading one more book over the next 2 days. It is only December 30th as I'm filming this, but I wanted to get it done so I can get it uploaded earlier in January since it is a new year. So we'll see if I end up reading one more book or not, and if I do, I'll mention it in my January wrap up most likely. But those are the 14 books that I have read thus far in the month of December to close off the year. My last couple of books were awesome. I did unfortunately have some duds, of course, in there that were just not for me. That doesn't mean that you should not check them out if they sound interesting to you. I think that is one of my favorite things about reading, of course, in this community is that we can all read the same books, but have different thoughts on the books and see different things, yet still have conversations about them. And I just love that so much, and I love doing wrap-ups and sharing my very rapid reviews of the books that I read every month for y'all. If you read any great books in the month of December, feel free to comment down below and let me know what they were, or if you read any of the same books that I read, feel free to let me know your thoughts on those. But that is all that I have for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.